Morth Vein was not a world for the faint of heart. A swirling cauldron of searing acid rains, scorched volcanic plains, and eerie bioluminescent landscapes, this death world had long claimed the lives of any who dared call it home. Yet against all odds, humanity had carved out an existence on this brutal planet, a world where survival demanded both ferocity and ingenuity. In the shadow of jagged basalt cliffs and beneath a sky that burned a perpetual ember red, Kale Rourke was born. His earliest memories were a tapestry of relentless wind, the hiss of corrosive mists, and the constant thrum of danger that permeated every moment. From his infancy, Kale's body had adapted to Morth Vein's vicious conditions. His lungs were hardened by the toxic air, his skin bore subtle, almost elegant scars etched by acid storms, and his eyes, a deep stormy blue, shone with a defiant spark honed by necessity. Kale grew up in a small settlement built in the lee of a dormant volcano, a precarious refuge surrounded by fields of noxious, venomous flora that pulsed with an alien light. His parents, survivors of a previous, catastrophic acid rain, had taught him the unspoken rules of existence on Morth Vein: trust nothing that didn't prove itself through trial, and learn to see beauty in the chaos. His father, a rugged man with calloused hands and a gaze that had weathered many storms, often recounted tales of past generations who had fought tooth and nail for every breath. His mother, both nurturing and stern, instilled in him the belief that adaptation was the highest form of art and that every scar was a medal of honor. From an early age, Kale understood that baptism on Morth Vein was not a gentle rite of passage but a battle with nature itself. The local customs required that every youth prove their mettle during the annual Trial of the Venomous Dawn, a grueling test where participants ventured into the toxic wastelands during the first light of the day. Here, they faced down not just venomous wildlife but also the raw fury of the planet's own chemical storms. It was on one such bitter morning, when the acidic rain turned the horizon into a shifting mirage of fire and metal, that Kale's resolve was truly forged. With nothing but a makeshift gas mask and the resilience inherited from a lineage of survivors, he strode into the storm. The trial would test his endurance, his awareness, and ultimately his spirit. And he survived, not unscathed but triumphant, his scars now symbols of his rebirth into the culture of the Deathworlders. As Kale matured, his reputation grew among his people. To many, he was the embodiment of the Deathworld's wrath and beauty, a living testament to human stubbornness against an environment designed to kill. His innate immunity to several of Morth Vein's notorious toxins was a mystery even to the settlement's top scientists. Some speculated it was the product of a genetic quirk, others whispered of experimental preconditioning carried out by secretive colonial engineers. Kale himself rarely pondered the origin of his resilience. Instead, he believed that every human on Morth Vein learned to be adaptable or perish. His very survival was a declaration that humanity, even when born on a world of death, could master its environment rather than be mastered by it. In the crowded communal hall of the settlement, elders recounted legendary tales of early colonizers. Their voices mingled with the creaks of timbers and the distant clashes of tectonic upheavals. They spoke of ancient ruins and relics buried beneath layers of toxic sediment, remnants of species long extinct, and perhaps warnings left behind by civilizations that had once tried to conquer nature only to be humbled by it. Kale listened to these tales with a curious blend of awe and determination. There was a legacy on Morth Vein, a story of struggle, adaptation, and sometimes tragic downfall. In this environment, every moment was a fight for survival, and every breath was an act of defiance. Even as Kale's inner circle began to take shape, hints of future alliances stirred quietly in his life. His closest friend since childhood, Lyra Vale, was every bit as resourceful as she was compassionate. While Kale met the harshness of the planet with stoic resilience, Lyra balanced it with sharp intellect and a zeal for uncovering the scientific secrets hidden in Morth Vein's toxins. Their friendship had deepened over shared hardships on this lethal world, a bond forged in the crucible of endless storms and near-death encounters. So too was there the enigmatic Dr. Maris Wynn, a renegade xenobiologist whose passion for unlocking the mysteries of Morth Vein often put her at odds with the conservative colony leaders. With wild hair and eyes that flashed with unquenchable curiosity, Dr. Wynne devoted countless hours to studying the planet's toxic flora and fauna. She believed that the poison coursing through the ecosystem might hold secrets that could one day lead to breakthroughs in medicine, adaptation, or even the key to humanity's survival far beyond Morthvane. Though her methods sometimes seemed reckless, nobody could argue with her results. In this crucible of endless danger and raw beauty, Kale's life was a daily struggle, yet it was also a celebration of human persistence. Every sunrise was a victory over nature's lethal designs, and every scar was a mark of honor. He had learned early that on a death world, pain was as natural as the air they breathed, and courage was measured by one's capacity to stand again after falling. As dusk approached on that scorched, turbulent afternoon, Kale paused on a ridge overlooking a vast expanse of toxic wasteland. The horizon shivered with heat and clouds of poison swirling in a deadly dance. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to marvel at the wild, untamed beauty of Morthvane, a beauty that demanded both respect and rebellion. In that meditative silence, he silently vowed that no matter the trials that lay ahead, he would confront every danger with the same fierce determination that had carried him through his baptism on this very planet. Unbeknownst to him, a sinister shift was stirring deep within the planet's core, a transformation that would soon release a poison deadly to all species, shaking the very foundations of life as he knew it. And for Kale, whose body had been tuned to survive the ordinary terrors of Morthvane, destiny was about to challenge his limits anew. Morthvane was already a planet of extremes, but in recent weeks a new terror had begun to stir beneath its already lethal veneer. Beyond the familiar red skies and acid-streaked horizons, deep within the toxic swamplands and barren, venomous plains, a shift in nature became unmistakable, a shadow that whispered of impending doom. Every morning, as Kale Rourke and his closest allies prepared for another day of survival, the landscape seemed to pulse with an unsettling energy. The normally brilliant bioluminescent fungi, which once offered only an eerie, natural beauty, now exhibited erratic, unpredictable flares of light. Toxic gas vents, long the backdrop for the hardy colonists' daily struggles, began to emit plumes of altered chemical compositions. These were no ordinary emissions. The very air itself was sighing with a greater concentration of corrosive toxins than it had in living memory. Kale first noticed the change at dawn. While trekking to a well-known scavenging site along the perilous ridges, his acute senses, sharpened by years of surviving storms and venom, picked up on a distinct metallic tang mixed with an unfamiliar aroma of decay and burnt ozone. His eyes, trained to read the subtle signals of his brutal home, scanned the horizon. In the distance, where the normally static poison fields lay shimmering under the early light, there was a frenetic churning, as if the land itself were convulsing. It wasn't long before word spread through whispers in the settlement. Over frayed comlinks and in hurried gatherings around flickering hollow projections, people murmured that the planet was sick in a way that transcended its normal cruelty. Among those who sought answers was Lyra Vale, Kale's steadfast friend since childhood. Lyra, whose innate curiosity was matched only by her cool logic, had been meticulously cataloging minor anomalies in the air quality and the behavior of local flora. Her data, taken from handheld analyzers salvaged from parts of old colonial technology, demonstrated a disturbing trend: rapid escalation of toxic compound levels in regions that had once been only moderately dangerous. Late one evening, in the cramped, dim recesses of their communal research shelter, Lyra unfurled her collected data before Kale. "Look at this," she urged, her voice low yet intense as she pointed out spiraling graphs and erratic fluctuations. "The poison isn't following its old cycle. It's surging almost as if something's triggering it on a massive scale." Kale's steely gaze hardened as he absorbed the unsettling figures. In a place where every breath was a gamble, this was an omen of things to come. Meanwhile, in a weather-beaten lab on the outskirts of the settlement, Dr. Maris Wynne, renegade xenobiologist and renowned for her unconventional methods, worked feverishly on samples extracted from the most volatile parts of the toxic fields. Unlike the cautious approaches favored by most colonists, Dr. Wynne thrived on the edge of risk. With wild, Determined eyes behind a pair of scratched optical lenses, she examined tissue samples from resilient local organisms. This toxin, it's not natural, she muttered to herself, her voice a mixture of awe and dread. I've seen traces of compounds that shouldn't exist on a planet like this, a blend of chemicals that hint at a long-dormant mechanism awakening beneath the surface. Over several days, the convergence of Lyra's data and Dr. Wynne's early findings painted a grim picture. Morth Vane's toxic equilibrium was violently disrupted. The source of the anomalous emissions remained hidden, a dark secret buried deep within the planet's roiling interior. Rumors spread among the settlement's elders and the younger Deathworlders alike that far below the scorched surface lay an ancient engine, a relic of a lost civilization, or an evolutionary failsafe that now threatened to purge the planet of life with a poison lethal to all species, whether native or off-world. Kale, whose immunity had long been his greatest asset, felt a familiar churn of apprehension. For him and his people, this was a crisis unlike any before. Not only did they have to battle a barrage of natural perils every day, but now an insidious, invisible enemy was poised to render even their hardy adaptations meaningless. As twilight bled into a crimson dusk, Kale stood at the edge of the settlement and gazed across the toxic plains. The landscape, already brutal and unforgiving, seemed to ripple with malevolence, a clear portent that change was coming, and it might not spare even the Deathworlders. Determined, Kale resolved that he must learn more about this emerging shadow. Together with Lyra and against no small measure of trepidation, they planned to join forces with Dr. Wynne. Their goal was clear: to uncover the origin of the aberrant emissions and, if possible, devise a way to contain or even reverse the onslaught of poison that threatened to overwhelm all life on Morth Vane. In that fragile moment before the night fully fell, under a sky heavy with promise and peril, the spark of desperate hope was lit in Kale's heart. The survival of his people, and perhaps much more, might depend on their next steps. It began with a trembling pulse deep beneath Morth Vane's scorched crust, a quiet rumble at first, almost imperceptible among the usual seismic sighs of a volatile planet. But within minutes, the ground convulsed as if in agony. A surge of toxic energy swept from the depths to the surface in a blinding flash of chemical fury. At dawn, the skies darkened unexpectedly. The familiar, if brutal, palette of acid red and amber gave way to an ominous charcoal gloom, torn apart by shimmering ribbons of vibrant, sickly hues. The air, already laced with corrosive mists, now carried an intensified, saturating stench of burnt ozone and decay. This was no routine flare-up. It was a gargantuan release of poison, a toxin that had been locked away beneath the planet's surface, now unleashed with unrestrained ferocity. As the surge swept across the tide-battered plains and treacherous ridges, entire ecosystems began to collapse almost instantaneously. The delicate balance that had allowed even the hardiest of Morth Vane's native life to eke out an existence was shattered. Bioluminescent fungi, once benign indicators of night's gentle glow, convulsed in erratic pulses before flickering out. Venomous flora, renowned for protecting the colonists from predators, now disintegrated into a toxic slurry that seeped into the soil. Even the mutated fauna, the creeping, venomous lizards and aerial predators that had long adapted to the Deathworld's harsh rhythms, staggered and fell in heaps under the relentless assault. Deep within the communal research shelter, Lyra Vale stared, wide-eyed and disbelieving, at the readouts streaming across her salvaged analyzer. Graphs that had shown only a gradual increase in toxic compounds now soared into ranges no system had ever recorded. "It's off the charts," she whispered into her comlink, her voice wavering between scientific curiosity and sheer terror. Every spectral figure conveyed a grim message. The poison was not following any natural cycle. Something was triggering it. Just a few crammed corridors away, in a dim laboratory lit by sputtering fixtures, Dr. Maris Wynne scrutinized samples taken from the newly disturbed toxic fields. Her eyes, behind scratched optical lenses, darted between her instruments and a live feed of the unfolding disaster. "This compound is a perverse cocktail," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. "A blend of native toxins with an alien signature, and it's accelerating." Her voice, though low, was charged with the weight of dread. In that moment, the gravity of the situation crystallized for her. The toxin was no random phenomenon. It was deliberate. It was engineered or, at least, activated by an ancient mechanism now awakened. Outside, the devastation was immediate and horrific. Colonists who dared emerge from their shelters were met by a maelstrom of poisonous wind and corrosive rain. In moments, those unaccustomed to such monstrous concentrations of toxins began to collapse, their defenses overwhelmed. The once familiar paths leading to daily scavenging grounds became gauntlets of death and chaos. Emergency alarms blared, mixing with frantic cries as people scrambled for any semblance of shelter or protective gear. Entire clusters of biodomes, designed to withstand Morthvane's predictable perils, now shuddered under the onslaught. Kale, whose body had been his ticket to survival on this unforgiving world, found himself striding through the tumult with a surreal calm. While others convulsed in agony, his skin, scarred but resilient, showed only minor burns as the toxin coursed around him. His pulse raced not with fear, but with the recognition of his unique physiology at work. His immunity, once a distant curiosity, now thrust him into the center of a maelstrom of fate. As he trekked toward the settlement's perimeter, he saw neighbors and friends, weakened by the toxic assault, clambering for refuge. He couldn't save them all, but every step he took was driven by an unmistakable determination to understand this catastrophe and perhaps to turn it to his people's advantage. Within the heart of the settlement, pandemonium reigned. Medical centers, custom-built from repurposed scrap and sheer willpower, overflowed with victims whose defenses had failed. Lyra, alongside a team of impromptu medics, worked feverishly to pull those stricken from the streets, her normally measured voice a lifeline amid the chaos. "We need to move and find cover," she commanded repeatedly, her eyes reflecting both the scientific urgency and the raw human concern that had always defined her. Over the cacophony, Dr. Wynn's urgent report came through on every channel. "This toxin, this abomination has altered its structure. It attacks every known biological defense, even those that evolved here over millennia. We are witnessing the birth of a superpoison." The news rippled through the settlement like a shockwave, and even hardened survivalists felt the icy grip of despair. In that maelstrom, Kale's figure became an accidental beacon of hope. His immunity was an anomaly. Where others fell, he moved with a resolute intensity. While many whispered that his survival was unnatural, a mutation that marked him as both superior and dangerous, few could deny that in his eyes burned a promise, that he would not let the Deathworld claim his people without a fight. As Kale hurried to assist the most vulnerable, his every action was a defiant stance against not only the poisonous onslaught but also against nature's unyielding decree. With measured precision, he collected data from his father's old research logs, remnants of past toxin surges, and the adaptive measures recorded by earlier generations. He recognized that buried within his genetic code might lie the secrets to weathering this catastrophe and perhaps even to neutralizing it. Standing amidst the chaos, Kale exchanged a brief but intense glance with Lyra, who had just fought off her own despair long enough to offer him a salvaged datapad. In her eyes, there was a shared understanding. They had lived all their lives amid death and danger, but now were forced to confront an enemy more insidious than any acid rain or venomous predator. The poison was unleashed, indiscriminate and merciless, and it would test their limits like never before. "Keep the data safe," Kale murmured, his voice rough with determination. "We're going to need every strand of these clues. If we understand it, maybe we can find a way to fight back." And so, amid the collapsing landscapes and the cries of a world succumbing to a newly unleashed poison, the fate of Morthvane hung in the balance. The cataclysm had begun, and for those who called this Deathworld home, survival would no longer come by sheer grit alone but through the quest to unravel an ancient and deadly secret that now threatened all life. In the immediate aftermath of the toxic surge, not only did Morthvane's once familiar landscape twist into a riot of seething chaos, but its human inhabitants found themselves suddenly alone. Reservations that had once been buried behind grudging acceptance now burst forth with condemnation. The colony built on the back of decades of hard-won survival was quickly isolated from any semblance of normal interstellar support. Within days, off-world dispatches arrived in heavily armored shuttles. Their arrival, an unwelcome fusion of flashing lights and implacable authority, signaled that the greater interstellar community had decided that, for everyone's safety, the entire colony was to be quarantined. Protocols were enacted without consultation, as external officials conveyed curt orders. You are now in a containment zone. No one is allowed to leave or enter until it can be confirmed that the threat is contained, intoned a stern, synthesized voice over external comlinks. Leaders outside the colony painted North Vane as a hazardous wild zone, a living laboratory of mutation and madness. For many off-world officials and traders, the survival of the Deathworlders, as exemplified by Kale and his kin, was inexplicable. Their immunity, once a symbol of human resilience, became twisted into a badge of suspicion. How can a species thrive amid a poison fatal even to other forms of life? They demanded. Rumors soon began to circulate that the very genes that allowed humans to weather the planet's natural fury had somehow contributed to unleashing the toxin. In hurried panels over interstellar channels, venerable bureaucrats argued that perhaps the humans' long exposure to North Vane had triggered unforeseen mutations, making them unwitting culpable agents in this new calamity. Within the colony itself, the fallout was immediate and wrenching. In the cramped corridors of the communal research shelter, tension replaced the usual resolute determination with a bitterness that cut as finely as any toxin. At a hastily convened council meeting, local leaders with voices heavy with regret and self-accusation bemoaned the turn of events. Some elder colonists, their lives etched with scars from previous acid storms, whispered that the community's very survival might have come at too high a price. They recalled fables of ancestors who had prayed for this day, only to be met with curses instead of miracles. Kale, once regarded as a quiet symbol of strength, now found himself inadvertently cast in the role of a pariah. His immunity, so long the cornerstone of human adaptation on North Vane, was now weaponized in the accusations leveled against them. "He's not like us," shouted one bitter voice near the council table, a voice that trembled with both fear and fury. "If his blood is what makes him immune, then what does that say about all of us?" The question hung in the stale air as friendly eyes turned suspiciously toward one another. Lyra Vale, standing near Kale with her arms crossed and brow furrowed, absorbed each word with a heart heavy with empathy. As the colony's de facto logistical coordinator, she struggled to balance the harsh realities imposed from without with the determination to preserve her people's dignity within. "These accusations are born out of fear," she urged gently to a gathering crowd. "We've lived in the crucible of this death world long enough to know that our bodies bear the marks of survival. They do not mark us as monsters." Yet despite her measured tones, there was no silencing the distrust that crept into every whispered conversation. Meanwhile, atop a makeshift command center built into a repurposed hangar near the colony's edge, Dr. Maris Wynne huddled over her workbench as she sifted through data and fluctuating chemical readings. Every new anomaly in her instrument readings deepened her troubled frown. During a hurried video conference with off-world scientists and government officials, her normally confident voice wavered under the pressure of relentless questioning. "They claim we have unleashed a poison, one that all life forms, regardless of adaptation, shall perish from," Dr. Wynne stated, her eyes darting between experimental screens and the stern faces on the holofeed. "But our readings prove that the toxic surge arose from an ancient mechanism hidden within the planet. This is not our doing." Her explanation, intended as a defense of human ingenuity and victimhood, instead only fueled further suspicion. The off-world panel demanded concrete evidence that the Deathworlders had not secretly engineered the calamity. In response, the data only underscored how uniquely adapted humans were to this toxic environment, an irony not lost on anyone present. For Kale, every accusation felt like another venomous assault. Walking through the narrow, dust-choked walkways lined with the relics of failed technology and faded hope, he watched neighbors, some of whom had grown to admire his rugged resilience, now wear expressions of doubt and fear. He recalled his days as a child, playing among the toxic canyons with reckless abandon, when the perils of Morth Vein had been just another part of life. Now, every molecule of poison swirling in the air carried a silent accusation, proclaiming that perhaps the price of surviving this death world was to become something inhuman. At dusk, alone on a crumbling ridge, Kale gazed out over the besieged colony. The once familiar sagas of human tenacity now took on mournful tones in the dim light. He resolved that if they were to emerge from this isolation and if they were indeed to prove their innocence, they must first uncover the truth behind the poison. Not only to quench the toxic tides that now threatened every living thing, but to vindicate the intrinsic nature of humanity, a species forged in the flames of adversity, unyielding in its quest for truth and survival. In the silence of that fateful evening, as the surviving colonists huddled in anxious clusters and voices rose in a cacophony of despair and defiant hope, the seeds of a new purpose were sown. Isolation had forced their hand, accusations had sharpened their resolve. What had started as an environmental catastrophe was evolving into a reckoning, a desperate need to expose the ancient mechanism behind the poison and to secure a future free of unwarranted blame. Kale set his jaw. With the combined efforts of Lyra, Dr. Wynne, and the few trusted comrades who still believed in the inherent worth of their existence, the quest for answers would begin. And no matter how bitter the isolation or how harsh the accusations, the Deathworlders would stand as living testimony to humanity's enduring spirit, a spirit that refused to be defined by a poison or by the fear of others. In the quiet after the chaos of the toxic surge, a heavy silence settled over the ruins of the once thriving colony. With the immediate threat of mass poisoning temporarily contained by frantic field hospitals and desperate sheltering, Kale, Lyra, and Dr. Maris embarked on a mission that had become as personal as it was necessary to seek out the ancient sources of Morth Vein's deadly secret. Late one morning, under a haze of lingering toxins and a sky dappled by stubborn streaks of orange and violet, the trio set out toward the outer reaches, a desolate belt where crumbling alien ruins lay half-buried in toxic sands. Their transport was a battered all-terrain rover, rigged together from scavenged parts and powered by determination. The rover's engine grumbled on uneven terrain as they ventured toward a region whispered about in old colony legends. Dr. Wynne's excitement was palpable. "These ruins," she murmured, tracing a calloused finger over her datapad as ancient glyphs flickered on its screen, "might be the remnants of a civilization lost to time and perhaps to their own hubris." She spoke of cryptic warnings and half-forgotten lore about a substance called the Deathbane Serum, a biological trigger designed to purge a world of invasive forces. To her, it was not mere superstition but an engineered failsafe buried deep within the planet's mantle. As they approached a colossal structure, a dome-like edifice with broken, alien carvings and arches softened by the relentless acid winds, Kale's stomach churned with uneasy anticipation. The building's surface was etched with symbols that glowed faintly in the dying light, as if imbued with memories of a once proud, but now extinct, species. The weight of the moment pressed upon him. Could this be the source of the toxic anomaly, the point where ancient technology had been weaponized against life itself? Inside the darkened interior of the ruin, their flashlights cut glaring beams through swirling motes of dust and chemical residue. Every step echoed, intruding upon the silent testament of long-lost knowledge. Dr. Wynne led the way, her eyes wide with scholarly wonder as she documented every symbol and structural detail. "These inscriptions," she said softly, "hint at a deliberate design, a mechanism to seal the planet from external threats. But it appears that the serum, once stable, might have been reactivated in some calamity." Kale paused before a mural depicting a great cataclysm, a panorama of humanoid figures surrounded by a cascade of deadly toxins, their distorted faces resigned to fate. The mural's haunting imagery stirred memories of his own battle against the poison. In that moment, he wondered, was his immunity merely the byproduct of survival on this ruthless world? Or did something deeper bind his destiny to these ruins? Lyra, ever the voice of grounding reason, placed a hand on Kale's shoulder. "We must learn from the past, Kale. Knowledge is power and might be the key to stopping this poison from claiming more lives." Her steady gaze reflected both compassion and pragmatic resolve. In the dim light of an alcove lined with alien script, Kale found himself alone with his turbulent thoughts. His mind raced with conflicting emotions. On one hand, his unique resilience set him apart as a beacon of hope, a living testament that humans could overcome even a planet designed to kill. On the other, he was haunted by the possibility that his survival might serve as a grim reminder of what was lost, that his very genes could be seen as a curse upon his people. He recalled the whispered accusations and fearful glances from his neighbors. Could it be that his immunity marked him as evolution gone awry, an omen that the poison was not external at all but a product of human transgression in an unforgiving environment? These thoughts churned within him as heavy as the toxic mists outside the ruins' crumbling walls. For several agonizing minutes, Kale stood with his back to a mural of devastation in a silent conversation with his own soul. "Am I a savior, or am I the harbinger of doom?" he whispered to himself. But in that self-doubt, a faint truth emerged. His very survival was proof that adaptation was not just possible, it was essential. He had been shaped by Morth Vane's merciless crucible, and that strength could be the key to finding an antidote for all who suffered. Later that day, as the trio regrouped in a small, sheltered alcove within the ruin, Dr. Wynne excitedly unveiled a cache of degraded documents and data crystals salvaged from a forgotten research station deep within the structure. "These," she exclaimed, her voice trembling with a mixture of scientific zeal and trepidation, "contain records from an extinct civilization that grappled with their own environmental crisis." The data hinted at experiments with bioengineered poisons, a desperate measure designed to eradicate pests or invaders but which spiraled out of control. Lyra's brow furrowed as she scanned the ancient diagrams showing intricate pipelines and reactors, the very schematics that might explain how a stable toxin, once controlled, could turn into an unstoppable plague. "They called it the Deathbane Serum," she recounted. "A failsafe that, in the wrong hands or triggered by an unseen calamity, could decimate all life." As the implications sank in, the burden of knowledge weighed heavily on each of them. For Kale, it was no longer just about surviving the present toxic onslaught. It was about understanding the legacy of destruction etched into Morth Vane's soil. That legacy might hold the answer to neutralizing the poison that now threatened every form of life, including his own people. Despite the grim revelations, a cautious spark of hope ignited within the group. With Dr. Wynne's data, Lyra's meticulous analysis, and Kale's unique physiological profile, they could piece together a way to not only comprehend the mysterious toxin but also to harness its underlying technology. The ancient records suggested that the trigger mechanism, if carefully deactivated, might allow the serum to be neutralized or even repurposed as a cure. Standing amidst the relics of a long-dead world, Kale found a renewed sense of purpose. "We carry the burden of their mistakes but also the possibility to learn from them," he declared, his voice firm despite the uncertainty swirling around him. In that moment, the scars on his body, once symbols of survival, became emblems of the resilience that could forge a new future from the ashes of the old. Thus, with the alien ruins echoing with unspoken warnings and long-forgotten knowledge, the trio realized the enormity of what lay ahead. They would need every scrap of insight and every ounce of courage to confront the engineered poison that now bound them. Kale's journey was no longer just about personal survival. It was about unearthing the hidden truths of Morth Vane and finding the means to save his people from a legacy of destruction. Morning broke with an unsettling stillness as Kale, Lyra, Dr. Wynne, and a handful of trusted companions prepared to leave the relative shelter of the colony. Their destination lay deep within what the locals ominously called the Poison Fields, a vast expanse of virulent mists, boiling acid streams, and mutated flora that had earned a reputation as the planet's most untamable frontier. The expedition's transport, a rugged, reinforced rover cobbled together from salvaged parts, bounced over uneven, corrosive terrain. The rover's metal frame glowed briefly in the acidic light of Morth Vane's early dawn, each jolt and shudder a reminder of the dangers that lay ahead. Kale led from the forefront, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the skies shuddered with billowing toxic clouds. Every member of the team was attired in improvised protective gear, lightly armored suits augmented with scavenged filters and visors that provided only marginal reprieve from the planet's acidic embrace. Lyra, clutching her datapad and a portable analyzer, reviewed her freshly captured readings as they advanced. The toxin levels here are off the charts, 50% higher than even our worst estimates, she reported, her tone a mix of scientific curiosity and apprehensive urgency. Dr. Wynne, ever the relentless investigator, nodded as she meticulously cross-checked her instruments. This region seems to be an epicenter. It must be near the reactor's subterranean vent point, she speculated, her eyes alight with the thrill of discovery despite the risk. As they ventured deeper, the environment revealed its noxious hostility. The poison field stretched before them like a living nightmare. Acid winds whipped across the barren plains, carrying droplets of corrosive liquid that sizzled on contact with even the hardened surface of the rover. Bursts of noxious gas erupted from fissures in the ground, forcing the team to don additional layers of makeshift respirators. Within moments, the team encountered even graver hazards. Towering, mutated plants, once benign vegetation twisted by centuries of toxic exposure, reached out with serrated leaves. Some exuded bursts of chemical sprays when disturbed, while others released paralyzing spores into the cowering air. As the rover halted near a particularly dense thicket, a sudden gust stirred the latent spores into a frenzied cloud. Kale raced forward, barking orders. "Everyone, cover your faces and move. Use the canopy as cover." In the ensuing scramble, the team maneuvered as one, their instincts honed by years of living on Morth Vein. But nature's terrors were not confined to passive hazards. In the distance, the guttural roar of a creature echoed a predator mutated by the planet's toxic legacy. From behind a ragged ridge, a massive, scaled beast lumbered into view, its eyes burning with an eerie bioluminescence. Its hide, armored and slick with corrosive residue, glinted under the dim light. Kale's heart pounded, but his innate calm took over. "Steady," he commanded, motioning for the team to lower themselves into the shadows of a nearby rock outcrop. In a heart-pounding sequence of split-second decisions, the creature charged. Lyra's quick thinking had already prompted her to deploy a makeshift flare, a burst of concentrated light designed to momentarily confuse the beast's predatory senses. The animal hesitated, wavered, and then lumbered past, its attention diverted by the sudden brilliance. In the aftermath of that near encounter, the team exhaled as one, their bond solidifying further under the weight of shared peril. Between obstacles, quieter moments allowed the expedition members a fleeting chance for introspection. In the eerie pause following the creature's retreat, Kale allowed himself a moment's reflection. The toxic mists swirling around them seemed to mirror the doubts deep within him. Was his immunity, his very nature forged on this brutal world, a blessing or the mark of a cursed destiny? He recalled the whispers back home, the fearful glances that once branded him as different, and though his thoughts were turbulent, a growing resolve emerged. His survival was not a fluke, it was testimony to the strength of adaptation, and if that strength could be harnessed, perhaps it could serve as a key to reversing the catastrophe. Lyra, ever the empathetic soul, noticed the change. "Kale," she said softly as they crouched against a rocky outcrop during a brief lull, "your strength isn't just in your body, it's in your determination to keep moving forward even when the poison seeks to stop you." Her words, simple as they were, resonated deeply, relieving a fraction of the inner burden he carried. Finally, after hours of grueling progress punctuated by relentless hazards, the team crested a steep ridge that offered a glimmer of their objective. Below them, nestled in a valley choked with toxic fumes and radiant acid plumes, lay the suspected epicenter of the poison surge, a crater-like depression that pulsed faintly with an unnatural light. Dr. Wynne's eyes widened in scientific fascination, while Kale instinctively steeled himself for what lay ahead. "That's it," Dr. Wynne announced, her voice trembling with both dread and exhilaration. "The nexus of the toxin. Beyond that lies the mechanism that we believe triggered the surge." Her words delivered not just a destination, but a promise, a possibility that the mysteries of Morth Vein could finally be unraveled if they dared to venture into the heart of danger. With determination etched on their faces, the team adjusted their gear, tightened their circle of trust, and began the descent into the valley. The journey through the toxic abyss was far from over. Every step promised new challenges not only of nature but of the secrets that lay buried in the planet's scarred history. Yet as they moved forward into the lethal embrace of Morth Vane's most dangerous region, each member of the team knew that this path, however fraught with peril, was the only route to finding the antidote and, perhaps, to redeeming their future on a death world that had tested them in every way imaginable. After hours of grueling travel through the toxic abyss, the team crested a final ridge and beheld a sight that stole their breath away. Below, nestled within a vast, cratered basin, lay the Nexus, a colossal structure of alien design half-submerged in acidic pools and shrouded by luminescent mists. Its towering archways and circular chambers, etched with symbols and patterns that pulsed softly like a living heartbeat, defied both time and nature. As the rover rumbled to a halt at the rim of the crater, Dr. Wynne's fingers trembled with scientific fervor. "This is it," she whispered, her voice echoing off stalagmite-like formations of crystalline residue. "The source of the toxin is the ancient reactor that has lain dormant for millennia. Somehow, it's been reactivated." Kale stepped forward, his boots crunching on the fractured, toxic earth. The Nexus loomed before him, a surreal fusion of biological decay and advanced alien engineering. The walls pulsed with a sickly, iridescent glow, and eerie conduits fed streams of corrosive liquid into the dark depths below. For a moment, the landscape itself seemed alive, a monstrous entity breathing out the very poison that had ravaged the colony. Inside the crumbling entrance, the team assembled cautiously. Their flashlights delineated vast chambers filled with incomprehensible glyphs and alien control panels, relics of a civilization that had wielded nature as both weapon and cure. Dr. Wynne moved deliberately, recording every detail with her portable scanner. This complex was designed to regulate a biosphere. I believe it was meant to maintain a delicate toxic balance, a failsafe against external threats. But something went horribly wrong, she murmured, releasing data onto her datapad. The true confrontation came when they reached the heart of the Nexus, a massive reactor core suspended over an engineered pit. Its chamber was dominated by a pulsating mass of energy entwined with organic filaments that dripped a luminescent toxin down onto stone floors. The constant hum of machinery, interlaced with distant, rhythmic beats that resembled a heartbeat, filled the air with foreboding significance. As the team gathered around the control dais, debate sparked with raw urgency. Lyra's eyes, filled with both determination and concern, broke the heavy silence. "If we shut this down completely, we might halt the toxin's spread, but we risk obliterating the very system that has, oddly enough, allowed us to evolve. Morth Vane's ecology, toxic and twisted though it is our home. Our adaptations are part of that system." Kale's voice, low and resolute, answered her own question. "We're caught in a paradox," he admitted. "This reactor may have been triggered long ago as a defense. Yet now it's a killer. I fear that deactivating it without understanding every consequence could mean erasing our future along with its toxic gift." Dr. Wynne interjected with passionate intensity. "Our evidence indicates that its activation isn't recent. It's been dormant only to be awakened by some calamity, natural or induced. If we don't stop it now, the poison will mutate further, and then nothing, not even your immunity, Kale, will save you." Her eyes swept over the gathered team, burdened with both scientific insight and personal peril. A tense dialogue ensued. Some argued for an immediate shutdown of the reactor even if it meant drastic and irreversible changes to the planet's ecosystem. Others, including Lyra and Kale himself, envisioned a subtler intervention, recalibrating the reactor, harnessing its energy, and perhaps even reprogramming its output to neutralize the toxin while preserving what remained of the environment a slim chance to transform catastrophe into salvation. In that charged moment, Kale stepped to the forefront of the debate. He recalled every grueling day on Morth Vane, the bitter acid rains, the relentless pressure to adapt in order to live, and every scar that testified to their enduring grit. "I was born for this place," he said firmly, his gaze fixed on the pulsating core. My body is a testament to survival, to evolution against all odds. I might be immune, but I'm not invincible. We must act, but with caution. If we rush this decision, we risk erasing the only future we've ever known. Silence followed his words, a reflective pause as each member considered the gravity of the choice. The ancient reactor loomed as both foe and potential ally, a force that had once safeguarded life and now threatened to eradicate it. There was no easy answer, only the daunting prospect of testing the limits of human ingenuity against the unknown logic of an alien engine. Finally, as the ethereal hum of the reactor resonated against their chests, the team resolved to work together. Dr. Wynne proposed a plan to interface with the reactor's control systems using a combination of her salvaged alien technology and Kale's unique biochemistry, a risky maneuver that would require Kale to place himself closer to the core than ever before. Lyra and the others would support him from a secure perimeter, monitoring his vitals and the reactor's responses in real time. Despite the gravity of the sacrifice, Kale did not hesitate. "Let's find out if we can bend this system to our will," he declared. His voice, steady and unwavering, carried the combined weight of his past and the hope for a future that might, just might, be reclaimed from the brink of oblivion. As the Nexus pulsed and whispered its ancient secrets around them, the team braced themselves for the next step, a step that would require not only physical endurance but also the courage to confront the unknown, to risk everything to tame the ancient force that had so nearly consumed them all. The pulsating hum of the Nexus reverberated in Kale's bones as he prepared for the most perilous undertaking of his life. Standing on a raised platform fashioned from salvaged alien debris, he could see the reactor's colossal core suspended over a chasm of toxic caustic liquid and organic filaments. Every glimmer of light and every throb of its eerie energy reminded him that death and perhaps salvation awaited those who dared get too close. Dr. Wynne's plan was simple in theory yet harrowing in practice. Interface Kale's unique biochemistry with the alien control systems to recalibrate the reactor's output. The makeshift array of salvaged alien tech arranged with trembling precision around a narrow walkway edging toward the reactor sparkled with spectral symbols and cryptic interfaces that even she respected in their mystery. Lyra and the rest of the support team manned their stations behind secure barriers, monitoring Kale's vitals and the fluctuating readings on holographic displays. "Remember, Kale," Dr. Wynne urged through a static-laden comlink, "this isn't just a physical test. It's an act of will. Allow your body's adaptations to resonate with the reactor's energy. You're our bridge between our primitive past and a future we dare to reclaim." With a deep, steadying breath, Kale adjusted his scavenged interface glove, a contraption cobbled together from plating, wires, and the glowing remains of alien circuits. Every inch of the journey ahead was fraught with peril. One misstep would unleash a torrent of runaway toxin or trigger a chain reaction that could annihilate everything he held dear. Yet his resolve burned brighter than any fear. Kale took the first step onto the narrow conduit leading directly to the reactor core. Acidic mists swirled around his battered form as if trying to tear him apart. His skin, already a map of scars from previous battles with Morth Vane's relentless storms, felt the sting of concentrated toxin more acutely than before. But within him flowed not just pain. It was a reminder of his singular, adapted strength, the very gift that set him apart from every other being on this death world. As he pressed further, flashbacks assaulted him, childhood days battling acid rains on rugged terrain, the fierce determination in his father's eyes, the steady guidance of his mother's words, and the constant presence of friends like Lyra who believed in him even when the world seemed to reject his kind. In every flash of memory, every lesson forged through hardship, he found the strength to keep moving forward. At the very edge of the reactor's inner chamber, he came face to face with the raw chaos of controlled power. The massive core, a writhing mass of energy entwined with organic, shimmering tendrils, pulsed in tandem with his own heartbeat. Embedded in its core was a series of alien terminals, ancient yet ominously alive, that represented the key to reprogramming the toxin's output. Here, Kale had to risk everything. With a strained nod, Kale activated the interface glove. It hummed to life as bioluminescent lines spread across its surface. He extended a trembling hand and placed it on the alien console. Almost immediately, the connection surged through him, a jolt of raw energy that seared his nerves and made his blood race. A cacophony of visions filled his mind, images of glimmering galaxies, ancient civilizations defeated by their own desperate measures, and the legacy of a world that had turned on its creators. The energy was as much data as it was raw force, each pulse a command in a language far beyond human comprehension. Pain lanced through his arm, and Kale clenched his teeth against it. In that moment, every instinct screamed to pull away, yet his resolve held firm. The reactor's energy began to synchronize with his body's unique biochemistry, a resonance forged by years of survival on an unforgiving world. He felt his scars, both physical and emotional, merge with the ancient power, each mark reaffirming his identity as a product of Morth Vane's crucible. At one point, a searing wave threatened to overwhelm him. His vision blurred with venomous light and searing heat. His limbs trembled as the alien energy's assault strove to break his will. In the midst of the agony, Kale's mind clung to a singular thought: his people, their future, and his own sworn vow to keep hope alive. "I will not fail," he whispered to himself, a mantra echoing in the depth of his soul. Time seemed both suspended and infinite as he labored to adjust the reactor's output. With meticulous, almost prayerful coordination, he fine-tuned the alien circuitry by channeling his own adaptive energy. Every moment was a battle, a collision of past trauma, physical torment, and the defiant spark of life. Slowly, the erratic pulsations of the reactor began to stabilize. The toxic output, once wild and destructive, modulated into a harmonic resonance that suggested containment rather than annihilation. The overwhelming surge began to subside, replaced by a rhythmic, controlled cadence that rippled throughout the chamber. Kale staggered back slightly, breathing heavily, as he felt the connection relax. In that excruciating crucible, he had not only recalibrated the ancient engine but also redefined his own limits. He had transformed his curse of immunity into a tool, a key to unlocking the reactor's catastrophic design and potentially saving his people. Dr. Wynn's voice came through softly on the comm, laden with relief. "Signal readings are shifting, balance is being restored." "You did it, Kale." Lyra's supporting team cheered in measured joy, their monitors confirming that the reactor's output had begun to drop to safe levels. Yet for Kale, the triumph was deeply personal, a bittersweet victory etched in pain and sacrifice. In that charged silence, as he slowly withdrew his interface glove, Kale gazed once more at the pulsating core. He knew that while his actions had halted the immediate spread of the toxin, this was but the first step in a long, uncertain journey to fully restore balance to Morth Vane. His body bore the scars of this ordeal, a living, searing testament to the dangers of unchecked power, but his mind was clearer, fortified by the knowledge that his sacrifice marked a turning point. Exiting the reactor's chamber, Kale was met with the concerned faces of his comrades, their expressions a mix of awe, relief, and silent admiration. The cost of this success was etched deep into his features: sweat-flecked, trembling limbs and eyes that had stared down near certain death. Yet amid the exhaustion, he exuded a newfound determination. He had not only survived the crucible of the reactor but had harnessed its primordial wrath, redirecting it away from a fate that would have forever doomed his world. "This is only the beginning," he said softly, his voice a mixture of fragility and unyielding resolve. "We've earned a chance to heal, to build, to transform what once threatened to end us into a promise of new life." In that moment, the sacrifice of the Deathworlder transcended the pain. It embodied the spirit of a people forged on a hostile planet, willing to risk everything to reclaim their future. And while the memories of agony would linger, they were now interlaced with hope, a resilient, defiant spark in the heart of Morth Vane. The reactor's eerie hum had finally begun to subside, a testament to Kale's near-mythical sacrifice and the steady hands of Dr. Wynn, who had meticulously captured every pulse of information from the ancient system. In the hours that followed Kale's return from the crucible, the atmosphere at the settlement shifted from frantic despair to an intimate urgency, an energy that spoke of possibility. The data Kale had risked his life to procure was being carefully analyzed in a repurposed research bay deep within the colony's fortified complex. Dr. Maris Wynne pored over the salvaged data crystals and analog readouts, her eyes scanning lines of cryptic code that bridged alien technology with the natural chemistry of Morth Vein. Together with Lyra, who had been diligently logging every fluctuation in the toxin's levels, the two forged a path from raw information to a conceptual blueprint of a counteracting agent. "We've seen the reactor's signature before," Dr. Wynne explained to a gathering of anxious technicians. "It's encoded in the toxin's very structure, a dark blue modulation that resonates with Kale's unique biochemistry. That means his body not only survived the onslaught but also learned to channel it. We can replicate that process." In a glass-encased lab lit by the pale glow of salvaged alien panels, samples of the toxin were carefully extracted from the reactor's vicinity. Kale's own blood, rich with adaptive enzymes honed by years on this lethal planet, was combined with these extraterrestrial compounds. The result, Dr. Wynne theorized, could be a precise catalyst, a serum that would recalibrate the aberrant toxin into a form that neutralized its own virulence. For days, the laboratory bustled with a blend of scientific determination and hushed hope. Lyra took meticulous readings as she and a cadre of technicians worked around the clock, combining bioengineered extracts with the raw data from Kale's interfacing with the reactor. Every experiment was a delicate trial, a handful of hope enmeshed with the constant threat that one miscalculation could yield catastrophe. During these long hours, Kale found moments of quiet introspection amid the clinical clamor. He watched as his once scars became living maps shared in animated discussions between Dr. Wynne and Lyra. They compared his genetic markers with the reactor's coded output, seeking that elusive formula that could reverse the toxin's devastation. Every test tube, every holographic display of molecular behavior, reminded him of the burden he had borne and the price his body had paid. But beyond the pain, those images fueled a deep-seated resolve. The antidote was not just medicine, it was redemption for his people. Lyra's unwavering calm and precise analytical mind drew comfort from the steady ticking of the lab's ancient chronometers. "It's like we're piecing together a puzzle," she murmured to Kale one night as they reviewed the compound's simulated molecular structure on a flickering hollow table. "If we can unlock the secret of this modulation, we can convert the toxin into something beneficial, a shield rather than a scourge." Kale nodded silently. The process was arduous. Plasma infusions, enzyme solutions, and meticulously adjusted pH levels were cycled through countless iterations. Each small success brought with it a spark of cautious optimism. The laboratory eventually yielded promising results. A serum that, when applied to contaminated test samples taken from the colony's water reserves, reduced the toxin's corrosiveness by nearly 80%. With the preliminary formula in hand, the team arranged a controlled demonstration within the safety of an isolated biodome on the colony's perimeter, a microcosm of Morth Vein's delicate ecosystem. A small, carefully monitored section of soil, previously ravaged by runaway toxin, was chosen as the testing ground. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation as Dr. Wynne injected measured doses of the antidote serum. For agonizing minutes, sensors recorded a slow, almost imperceptible shift. Then, a cascade of chemical reactions unfolded. The soil's pH began to stabilize, the erratic glow of failing bioluminescent plants brightened into a steady, life-affirming radiance, and even the surrounding air seemed to lighten, as if the very poison was receding before this new force of nature. On a nearby monitor, Lyra's voice broke the tense silence. "The contaminant levels are dropping steadily. In this small sector, we're witnessing a reversal, an actual rebound to conditions that could support life." The room erupted in subdued cheers, a shared victory that felt monumental in the midst of their isolation. It was in that moment, as the fragile ecosystem within the biodome began to breathe again, that Kale understood the full depth of what they had achieved. The antidote was not a panacea for all of Morth Vein, but it was a promise, tangible proof that the human spirit, honed under the crucible of Deathworld living, could turn even the most lethal curse into a tool of salvation. Dr. Wynne carefully sealed the serum samples, labeling them as Hope Compound KV9. Lyra, with a mixture of relief and unspoken determination, reminded everyone that there was still much work to do. "We need to scale this up, test it further, and prepare for a controlled rollout," she said firmly, her voice echoing the resolve of the team. As the antidote's success began to ripple through the scientific community at the settlement, a renewed sense of unity and purpose took root. Kale, bearing the invisible scars of his sacrifice, felt a weight lifted from his shoulders. In his eyes, there was now a glimmer of something new, a belief that even in the shadow of the deadliest poison, humanity could reclaim its destiny. The birth of the antidote signified more than a scientific breakthrough. It was a rebirth of hope on a planet long defined by death. With the success of KV-9, the people of Morth Vein had a chance to heal and, perhaps, in time, transform their forsaken death world into a sanctuary of new life. The morning light that broke over Morth Vein was different now, softer, tempered by the promise of renewal rather than the usual searing intensity of acid storms. In the heart of the colony, where once grim anticipation and despair had reigned, a palpable energy of hope now pulsed through every corridor and habitation dome. The antidote, meticulously developed and christened Hope Compound KV-9, had begun to show its enduring power on a scale that transcended science. It was restoring life. Over the ensuing weeks, controlled applications of KV-9 were rolled out throughout the colony. In biodomes constructed at the settlement's edge, each designed as a microcosm of Morth Vein's tumultuous ecosystem, Lyra and her team monitored the changes with equal parts caution and wonder. The once barren soils, blackened and cracked by relentless toxicity, steadily regained a vibrant hue as the compound neutralized the corrosive elements. New life sprouted in unexpected places. Hardy, mutated plants began to unfurl their leaves in vibrant hues, and bioluminescent fungi, long thought to be fading into oblivion, pulsed with renewed radiance in rhythmic harmony with the planet's subtle heartbeat. Dr. Wynn's research teams, working alongside indigenous survivalists, set up mobile laboratories to collect samples from the newly transformed regions. Their data confirmed that the toxin's deadly reach was receding. Slowly, the measurements of corrosive compounds in the atmosphere and soil dropped, and vital indicators of ecological balance began to stabilize. The antidote was proving not only effective in healing afflicted pockets of the planet but had also sown the seeds for an entire renewal of Morth Vein's precarious biosphere. In the midst of these scientific triumphs, the human community, once demonized as the cursed children of a death world, emerged as living symbols of resilience. Kale, whose sacrifice had been the fulcrum of this breakthrough, now found himself both revered and humbled. No longer simply the outlier immune to the planet's worst, he was celebrated as a guide, a man who had turned his scars and struggles into the foundation for collective healing. At a public assembly held in a newly constructed amphitheater of repurposed alien stone, Ambassador Kale stood before his people. His voice, still carrying the gravelly echoes of battles fought and sacrifices made, resonated with a blend of humility and fierce determination. "Today, we witness not merely the fading of a poison," he declared. "We see the birth of a future one in which every drop of suffering has paved the way for renewed life in every cracked crevice of our harsh home." The assembly was alive with cheers and tentative applause. Faces once lined with sorrow now shone with the soft glow of hope, tempered by the recognition that healing was only the first step toward recreation. Families embraced in the open, and elders recounted tales of past tragedies, now interwoven with predictions of a brighter tomorrow. The antidote had done more than restore ecology. It had mended the frayed fabric of a community that had long suffered the stigma of being outcasts. Word of Morth Vein's gradual healing began to spread beyond its quarantined borders. Once dismissive off-world officials and traders, who had once labeled the planet a cursed relic of toxic design, soon became curious observers. Scientific delegations from neighboring systems arrived not to contain, but to learn. They marveled at the transformation, how a planet that had nearly been condemned to everlasting death was being reborn through the sacrifice and ingenuity of its hardy inhabitants. In quiet but steady negotiations, ambassadors and researchers discussed the possibility of forming alliances. The success of KV-9 had ignited a broader conversation about adapting to hostile environments and harnessing their intrinsic energies for renewal rather than destruction. The people of Morth Vein, led by pioneers like Kale, Lyra, and Dr. Wynn, began to envision a future in which their expertise in turning poison into promise could serve as a model for other worlds facing environmental collapse. As the colony slowly emerged from isolation, the people of Morth Vein collectively acknowledged that their story was one of transformation, a testament to the indomitable human spirit. In a final act symbolizing this new beginning, Kale and his closest comrades planted a grove of acid-resistant saplings at the heart of the settlement. The ceremony, solemn and celebratory, was a living memorial to every life lost, every hardship endured, and every triumphant moment that led them to this rebirth. Standing beneath the shade of the newly planted trees, Kale reflected on his journey. Each scar on his body, each trial he had faced since his earliest baptism in the acid storms, now served as a badge of honor. They told the story of a man molded by a harsh world whose very survival had become the catalyst for a radical transformation among all living things on Morth Vein. Lyra, ever the voice of pragmatic optimism, smiled as she surveyed the burgeoning green. "This is our new dawn," she whispered. And in that quiet moment, as the first gentle rays of a rehabilitated sun touched the reclaimed land, hope glimmered like a promise written in every leaf, every ripple in the rejuvenated streams. Morth Vein would never be entirely the same. Its landscapes, once defined solely by relentless toxicity and despair, now bore a dual legacy: the memory of its fatal past, intertwined with the promise of regeneration. The antidote had been only the first step, a key to unlocking deeper secrets of adaptation and renewal that promised to propel the Deathworlders into a future where they were not outcasts but innovators and custodians of life in its most defiant form. As Kale looked to the horizon, his eyes filled with a quiet determination. He knew that their journey was far from over. The rebirth of Morth Vein was both a conclusion and a beginning, a testament to humanity's endless capacity to transform even the most lethal curse into an enduring legacy of hope.
Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe the channel for more videos like this.